All right, welcome to Shades of Life, conversation number something or other, with Tenneson Wolf and Jerry Nagel and me, Kathy Jordan. Many of you who watch this already know who we are. This week, Tenneson and I were on an Art of Hosting regional contacts call where they hosted an open space. And later that same day, I was on a Change Leaders Network call hosted by Dana Perlman. And we've been in this little check-in already. The conversation's already been kind of juicy about some of the our harvest from the experience of being in these calls, and the Change Leaders Network call was focused on connecting and belonging, and what is there a difference, and if so, what is that difference? And it kind of connects back into this whole question of the Art of Hosting. We all know each other, met each other through the Art of Hosting network long time ago. We've been around this for a little bit, and the call that Tennyson and I were part of earlier this week was a very rich conversation. There were almost 50 people from various parts of the globe who participated in that call. And we're just really thinking about the evolution of the Art of Hosting conversations that matter, since we've been part of the network. And this network has grown. In 2005, when I did an Art of Hosting training, there were like 3 in the world. And anybody who was connected to the network, if they didn't know each other personally, they knew who people were. And we're now in a time when there are 16,000 people in a Facebook group for the Art of Hosting. There are trainings happening all over the place. There are practitioners all over the world. And this is part of, so where are we now? And also, what does the Art of Hosting network need now? So, and we've been in this conversation just a few minutes ago about what's at the core of the Art of Hosting. Is there still a core? What does all that mean? So I pressed record here a couple of minutes ago. We're just gonna kind of pick up the threads of the conversation we've already been in and move them forward. Jerry had offered something interesting about the size of groups that can be cohesive and coherent, and what happens after that. So
In this case, the size of the network, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm just going to stop it. I'm going to stop there and let you guys pick up some threads here.
Holy moly.
Or if you don't, I'm going to launch right in, actually. Probably thinking about that. I was part of a conversation called by Rowan Simonson about what is the weight maybe that the Art of Hosting network is carrying that needs to be let go of, and what does the Art of Hosting network need now to be, I'm going to say re-enlivened. That might not be that fair, but I think we're all still feeling like we're coming out of COVID and how things were shut down with COVID. And, so what are the things we need to let go of, and what are some of the things that we can embrace? And I'm going to talk about this because one of the things that hasn't been talked about a whole lot in the last decade or so is stewarding, and what does that mean? And the question came up in the group that I was part of is, do we need words like steward anymore? Do we need words like apprentice? What do they even mean? And also, in the early days of the Art of Hosting, there certainly was, it felt like a community, and there was a center to that community. And now for me and for other people as well, it feels like there is not one Art of Hosting community. It feels more like a community of communities, and maybe each of those communities has its own core and its own center. And so we're still interconnected, but the nature of that interconnection has probably changed a bit. So now I'll stop.
Now, Jerry and I are going to pause a little bit, and then I want you to jump in again.
All right. We'll see what happens. We'll see if that works.
What do you got, Jerry? You want to pop?
Well, you said something earlier, Tenneson, before we started recording that is kind of, it was on my mind in a different way, but it fits a little bit here in the notion of tribes. And like, what's our tribe, if you will? And I don't know if there's a better word than that or not, but we know it has a resonant a definitional meaning to us. And partly the data shows that sort of a maximum tribal size is about 150 people. You get beyond that, you start to lose the ability to know each other. And so that's one little element. But yesterday I spent 4 hours in a tattoo shop. And there's like 4 artists at work on different people and people coming and going. And it's an extraordinarily eclectic group of people, from all kinds of head to toe tattoos to jewelry and piercings and ears and just somebody walking in that looks like they just left a college class and want to get a tattoo earlier. And but the conversations are really fascinating in a way, and it always causes me to remind myself that you have to go beyond any superficial perspective on someone, because you can find yourself in some amazingly deep intellectual conversations with folks that you might go, I got to walk on the other side of the street, or something. And so, I mean, what it fits for me is who's my tribe, in one way. I mean, as Kathy says, I'm running out of real estate, for
I don't
stuff.
say that. You say that.
I heard that from you, but we won't. Anyway,
Who thought that first?
Who's on first? But who is our tribe? And in the art of hosting world, have we become tribal in a way? And there's a whole nother world out there of people to reach and connect with that don't look like us, or don't come from the same economic backgrounds, or other life experiences. I feel I actually go to this tattoo shop about once every 6 months, and I spend about 4 hours there, 5 hours there. I really look forward to it, as much for the interaction of everybody that's in that space, and listening to the conversations. And sometimes they're cross table conversations, so somebody's being worked on by somebody else joins the conversation that I'm in with my artist, and so on. It's anyway, I don't know where I'm going with it, other than I'm concerned about tribalism, and it fits also into the polarization that we think we're experiencing in society in general right now. How do we be parts of multiple groups? I'm complete.
That certainly did not go in any direction I would have been expecting.
Wait, what does that mean, Kathy? What do you mean by that?
Like, because just tribes in art of hosting, I guess, is kind of where that lands. But I'm just like, okay, I'm not quite sure where that thread came from, but
okay. Well, I'll try to play, okay? Because I think we're trying to mix some things here like we normally do. If I start with your tattoo shop experience, Jerry, then I feel like you're describing something that is very personalized, you with your artist in your chair, but then there are the other artists and there is the shop. So there's something about, I imagine anyway, some kind of belonging of the people that are within the walls there, or maybe even broader into a tattoo community and that kind of artistry. And maybe it is something like that. We're drawn to the artistry, we're drawn to the deliberateness of symbolism.
Mm.
There could be a bunch of things there that create a kind of sharedness. I'm thinking back to the call, Kathy, that you're referencing that we both participated in. And in that call, in the basic check-in process, I assume it was random, but I don't actually know. And I got put into a small trio with a man from Chile and a woman from Austria.
Mm.
And the man from Chile, his name was Pablo. And it had already been spoken that he had just come out of an art of hosting. Somewhere he said that. And in the chit chat of things. And so in the further chit chat, as we were getting started before the woman from Austria showed up, I said, "So how was your thing?" And in that playful, easy, open, chatty way, but thoughtful way, I thought, he said, "We laughed, we danced, we ate, and we told stories."
Mm.
And he said, "My heart is so full of love."
Huh.
Now, for me, I hear that and go, that's the kind of tribe I like. Or that's the broader celebration to me, of what are these things about, or what coheres. I don't know if I like my own question, but what coheres an art of hosting community? Well, if that's the stuff that happens, I'm pretty excited about that.
Mm.
Because I think that has a lot to do with, now what do you do in your community, and what do you do in your team and your job and your family and all of that. So I think that's one thing that I would add in my own search for what's underneath, or what am I compelled to contribute or to try and show up for. I like the phrase belonging and becoming. I like the big stories. Kathy, you spoke that earlier. I don't know if we're recorded, but some of the connection and belonging. That's what you're speaking with, the piece with Dana. Yeah. I like the invitation to such big notions, belonging and becoming. So that shows up in me and the particular flavor of such art of hosting work that I want to do. One of the things, and that means I evolve in a particular direction also. However, having said that, I don't think I'll ever not do art of hosting.
Mm.
How I offer it has changed a bit. Like I'm less involved in some of the open enrollment offerings now, but there's never not doing it for me. If I work with a community or a client, or I volunteer and they want some help thinking about how could we do this day of our learning event together, well, I may not be talking explicitly about some art of hosting manual, but I'm giving them the things that I would do. Like, oh, a little circle would be good. Oh, this would be great for a cafe. This would be a great time for some open space. So there's a never not doing part of it for me, even though it might be named or evolved in some nuanced directions. And I find I don't, man, I wish I had a bigger brain or whatever it takes to sometimes track the complexity of it.
Mm.
I'm not trying I don't think as much about the whole network and do we need stewards and things like that. Maybe in part because I just got frustrated with it somewhere along the way. But what I find myself doing is I'm just trying to work well with the people in front of me. So an example is, a colleague, local colleague, and he and I have created a leadership cohort together. And we don't call it's a 6-month program, and it has 2 face-to-face 3-day gatherings, and it's a corporate group. And we don't talk about it as art of hosting. We talk about it as the leadership development program.
Mm.
But he, my buddy, he knows very well the art of hosting background, and we sort of create from that format. So all of that. Oh yeah, there was one other thing there. I'm not even sure what question I'm speaking to, but maybe it's something about the what is tribe, or what is the tribe that I'm drawn to, or what is the group the energy that I want to create. If I bring it back to the Zoom call, Kathy, that you and I had, I didn't go into that call trying to resolve what is the art of hosting,
Mm.
what's the leadership network, where are we at, are we past the numbers? All of that might be true and it's relevant at some level, but my heart's not in it that way. Where my heart is in it is things like Pablo saying, we danced, we ate, we sang, we told stories. Because I go to the story that's underneath that. Oh, there must have been some sweet connecting going on. I imagine some authenticity. And when I show up on a call like the one that we did, I mentioned before we started recording, in part, it's not even what I'm looking for. Well, it probably is true that I'm looking for it, but I left with it. I left with a kind of feeling of an activation. I don't
Mm.
know if we agree on what the art of hosting is, but something in that love, dance, eat, tell stories comment, my heart is so full of love. I feel like that activates something in me that recognizes that. And it also celebrates, it brings out something in me that celebrates something that's shared there. And I don't want to lose that feeling while I try to massage too much of maybe that complexity part that I can't seem to find in my brain. That's a little unresolved, but that's what I'll offer.
I think that Jerry and I would agree that art of hosting is just part of the way we do things. It's kind of in our DNA now. And one of the people who read our book, Building Trust and Relationship at the Speed of Change, mentioned that that art of hosting, that hosting was evident throughout
Yeah.
like it's just embedded in the stories that we tell. So I would certainly agree with that. I didn't show up to that call with any expectation other than seeing people,
Yeah.
connecting with people. And I probably knew at least a third of the people on that call. It was
Same.
so amazing.
Mm.
And so the conversation that I ended up in was a complete surprise to me. It even came up in my little triad check-in. Someone raised that as part of the, what has our attention now, or whatever the case was. So that was
Mm.
also kind of interesting. The notion of connecting and belonging is also interesting. You mentioned love, and that came up in the conversation I was in the afternoon, that love is one of those things that kind of universally connects many of us, or where we feel a sense of belonging. And, it can be relatively easy to find connection in conversations, even with people that you're just meeting. And connection is probably it needs to be there in order to also have a sense of belonging. And I also did say, like, every time we do an art of hosting training,
Mhm.
art of participatory leadership, or whatever it is that we call it, I always fall in love with those groups. Because
Yeah.
the people come, even if they initially come guarded, they really come with open-heartedness, and
Yeah.
they're really longing for that space, even if they didn't know that that's what they were longing for before they showed up in that space. And it's so interesting also because in the art of hosting call, a number of people refer to art of hosting as an operating system, and Jerry and I do as well. Like, it's a way of getting to the conversations that we want to get to. And just now thinking about that and the spaces that get created kind of does a disservice to the spaces that are created when we come together in an art of hosting field or energy or whatever.
What are you
And
saying? Sorry, Kathy, what are you saying creates the disservice? We say that again.
if we just say that art of hosting is an operating system,
Ah, I see.
I think it does a disservice to what really happens in those
Yeah.
spaces.
Ah,
Jerry had made a point earlier about a belief in the value of good conversations, and maybe that's some of what's at the core of that. So now I'm kind of wondering about some of the language that we use, or even some of the ways that I've been thinking about it, because always in those spaces, connecting and belonging happens. And
mhm.
I say always, knowing that's true for me, but we also know that there were conversations called on what needs to be healed and some other related conversation to that. So not everybody feels that way. and not everybody feels included in the art of hosting. In fact, in the group that I was in, someone who's been part of the art of hosting network for 5 years said initially he didn't feel included at all.
Yeah.
So these are age-old conversations about the network. Anyway, so many pieces, but I'll stop there for a moment.
So the question that's kind of on my mind is, what's the true nature of belonging? What are the components of belonging? And I want to, as I'm just sort of free forming here, put it into two categories. One is the category that really is important to me. It is the kind of experience that Kathy was just sort of talking about, and you've experienced at Tenneson. We get in circle in the opening of an art of hosting, and all of a sudden people are vulnerable. They're intimate. They're sharing things they never would have imagined that they would share in a group with people they don't know. So, and I see that. I'm going to come back to my little tattoo parlor shop, and the conversation's there because you're vulnerable. You're putting yourself physically vulnerable. Someone's altering your body. But the conversations there are intimate, often, and unexpected. And so there's one component of belonging or one form of belonging that has with it elements of vulnerability and intimacy and openness. And that begins to bind us together. We belong in that space. There's another, you might call it belonging, I think, that's just transactional. I'm part of a group and we're just there because we're some form of political transaction or whatever it might be. I feel that a bit in sort of the MAGA crowd right now. They belong to the crowd, and it might be some forms of self-protection, but I never hear any of them interviewed talk about the kind of vulnerability and intimacy and caring that to me is really what belonging is about. You know, and then the inclusion then is related to that. I'm you know, in a way, but yeah, it's that vulnerability, intimacy piece that's I think at the core of true belonging for me. Whatever the group is, whether it's an art of hosting circle group or those of us sitting getting work done and we're talking about our trans children, or somebody is, or they're talking about, you know, their mother that's ill, or I mean the same kind of openness and intimacy. Yep. So that's it.
I'm kind of drawn into these references that we have among us and with others too about the field. It was something in what you said, Kathy, but the translation that happened in my heart and brain was the field opens us to a fulfillment of a longing. So in a group, I think we're doing cool things, and it might look like, well, now we're going to do this process/exercise. I feel like I so often am trying to translate and maybe dig a little deeper with folks to say, it looks like we're doing these small table conversations, but on the other hand, what I think we're really doing is this. And that's where I feel like many of us as hosts, facilitators, etc., we're trying to thicken the narrative a little bit, or maybe deepen the narrative a little bit. So I'm drawn to that language. The field opens us to a fulfillment of longing, whether we know it or not also. Because then, you know, I love showing up in places where we're just trying to make meaning of life and the journey and the experience. And by the way, I think that's as practical as it gets. But not everybody thinks that is as practical as it gets, and you know, needs more translation or more, you know, some of that, or maybe even something different. I think that many of us often are offering a language that suggests perhaps a bigger possibility or a deeper possibility or another kind of fulfilling possibility. And I think for those of us who are hosting such things, our energy matters a lot. If we're just dialing it in and mechanically doing it, it turns out flat.
Yeah.
And all of us have maybe done some of that along the way. I have done some of that along the way. But if I feel like I'm kind of living that energy of, oh gosh, I think we have so much that's possible here through a deliberateness of connection and learning and direction together, whether it's for 2 days or 5 days or an hour and a half together, I think that energy does something to animate and help to fulfill a field. I I feel like I run into that. Then I'm just thinking about the kind of fulfillment of the longing. Because when I think back to this corporate leadership development program that I'm working with, they're not the folks that are signing on for some heavy retreat. That's not what they're doing. Some of them might have that in them a little bit. A lot of jokes are made. There's kind of a lot of lighthearted joking that goes on. And I find as a facilitator there, it's a little hard for me to do that because I'm trying to like meet them where they are, but also call bullshit. Like, I think we can do something different here, or hold my, energetic ground again. But then in that same group, I'm thinking back to specifically the opening day that we had together it was really 2.5 days spent together at a hotel. So it is an offsite. And kind of doing a bunch of teachy things. Like there was some required, I think I've talked about this before, personality typing system and the information that goes with that. So it was a little more didactic with some little interactive with it. That night we went back to circle. And that night we went back to the circle. This is 18 people in a room. And we had invited everybody to bring an object that matters to them in their life and or leadership. I don't remember what the prompt was. And guess what? Lo and behold, when we did that circle, even though the jokes were still there, they dissipated.
Right.
And the way that, the way that I think many of us have seen that, what it looks like and sounds like is a few tears show up. And this isn't a place to cry, so people apologize for their tears. Or they make a statement, the kind of like nervous joking comments again, like, oh, this feels a lot like therapy. And what it means to me is it's just gotten real in a way that they didn't anticipate. Now, those of us who are hosting it, we're not trying to be therapists. We're just trying to hold a good process with one another so that there is connection and maybe so that there is some belonging. This is soapboxy for me. We're trying to do all of that, but that's the scale. I find, I have energy right now in all of the deep retreating and the core like self-hosting and care work that needs to be done to evolve this vessel to be able to be with others in good ways. And sometimes it looks like, hey, we're just going to do a circle. We're going to talk about the item that we have, and we're going to tell a wee bit of a story. And then the rest, sort of animates into that field that I think is belonging, or a field of fulfillment of those longings. Okay, I'm getting pretty excited. Last thing, I'll name it because I think it simplifies. I have a memory of my grandparents on my mom's side, my grandma and grandpa Gould. We used to go holidaying. Oh, shoot, we lost Jerry.
Well, he'll either come back in or you just keep going and
okay,
it happens.
I remember with my grandparents, we used to vacation with them, tent trailer camping, me and my sister and 2 cousins with my youngish grandparents. And we go in the pop-up tent trailer world and we camp for 2 months in BC, 2 weeks in BC. And whenever I came home from that, Kathy, I always felt like there was some kind of intense belonging. I'm talking about it as a 10-year-old, but I felt something that I would now language as, oh, such a deep belonging. My grandparents, my cousins, my sister, we're at the beach, we're jumping off the dock, all of that. When I came home from those things and said goodbye to grandma and grandpa and my cousins and felt sad, I remember that the feeling that stuck with me is, I just want to be a good person. I somehow just want to be a good person. Well, I think in the art of hosting world, we're cultivating whatever that field is.
Yeah.
It inspires people in very directions of do your good in the world, whatever that is. Know you belong. Try to invite some belonging with others. Holy shit, good things might happen. Thanks for hearing all of that.
Ah, I like that. Jerry just sent a note to say that his computer froze up. So I said, come back in if you can, but we do know he has
Okay.
a
He's got a
thing.
thing too, so.
So, yeah, so we'll see if he comes back or not. Story, right? We do this too with the bring an object. And I think that's such a doorway into people revealing something of themselves that they might not have otherwise,
Yeah.
because that connection, the object connecting to their journey, they have to think about that
Yeah.
a little bit. And it's always deeply personal for
And
people.
in a way, maybe that they haven't thought about it before,
Right.
or definitely haven't been invited to think about it before in a group.
Right. Right. And even if it's random,
Yeah.
they're seemingly random. Like I grabbed it on my way out the door.
Yeah. Right.
So I think that story really is a connecting point. You're welcome, Bob.
Welcome back, Jerry.
Tennyson had just carried on and at my invitation, and it took us to story, basically. And that's, where we are now, talking about how those objects that people bring to that opening circle really connect them into a story thread of their own life that they might not have anticipated. And I find, even for us, for me, I'll select an object, but I don't even know necessarily what that story is going to be, and until it's my turn in the circle to do that. So
I'm going to loop it back into, I think, where we started with art of hosting, network, community, some of that. Because in the very many expressions and maybe evolutions even of what the art of hosting is, I know that there are some that really get excited about the technique, as in, this is how you do a cafe really well. I know that that matters, but I just don't get as excited about it. If it isn't paralleled or accompanied with a narrative that fits somewhere more in, like, well, there's some belonging and there's some community and there's some yearning and there's some, mystery that we live together, and some of those sort of deeper soul things. That's where I feel like I have more gifts to contribute, and I want to be able to be with other people. And maybe in the broad network that is the art of hosting field, it matters that there are some that have this particular flavor and this particular flavor and this particular flavor. And maybe it's not our job to sort through the differences of that, but just keep offering it with those in front of us in the best ways that we can. I'm moved by that. That's probably some of my own, operating strategy, I guess. Something like that.
Well, I'll just say that the conversation I was in that call felt freeing, because it felt like a receptivity to an acknowledgement that 20 plus years in, we're in a different place.
Yeah.
And it might require something different. And maybe we don't even need to be in a conversation about what is the core essence. And maybe we don't need to steward something that is the core essence, because that core essence, whatever it is, maybe it's stewarding itself.
Because I got to wander on here in a minute with granddaughter Joy. I want to just come back to this notion a bit ago about art of hosting and conversations that matter, or being in good conversation. And when I think about whether it's an art of hosting training or doing a World Cafe or something else, the ones that stick in my mind are the ones where people experience being in conversation differently.
Yeah.
So I think about a World Cafe I did many years ago here in Minnesota. and on water quality. And one of the people that was there had been a thorn in the side of the commissioner of natural resources forever. And at the end of that World Cafe, he walked up to the commissioner and he said, "This is the first time I've ever felt I was listened to and heard." Conversation was different. Or Kathy and I did an art of hosting training and rural community. One of the people there was the leader of the conservative faction, political conservative faction in town. By the end of the art of hosting, he was in conversation differently than he'd ever been in before. And it changed how he engaged with others in the community. And there, you know, we could go on with other stories like that. And I just don't want that lost.
Yeah.
Like that to me is art of hosting is successful when somebody says, I'm in a conversation that I've never believed I could be in before. You know, I'm interacting with people differently. I want to be with people differently. I don't want to be the thorn. I want to contribute. I want to, or our friend Myrna Lee, who organized the largest wheelchair rolling event in, you know, in the Guinness Book of World Records, you know, because she participated in an art of hosting. She went out and believed in the ability to do this. That to me is, it's not technique. It's not, you know, technique matters, but it's that something shifts in people. And that's a hard thing to sell to folks, you know. So it's like, oh, come buy this because you're going to be different. Oh, you know, yeah, okay. So that's to me the core of art of hosting, is that conversations matter, but conversations can be what we wish they could be. They can be different.
I think we're probably getting close to wrapping up. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So maybe I'll offer this as my little closing word that plays off of what you just said, Jerry. I know this feeling personally for me. Well, let me say it and then I'll just add to it a little bit. I love it when somebody says, "I like who I am when I'm with you."
Mm,
And that applies to the group too. Like I like who I am when I'm in this group or when I was in this group, which could be the conservative, you know, party leader that never gets listened to and feels like he or she has to jack up the volume and all of that. And I think when someone gets that experience of, wait, there's a tiny little bit of belonging, I'm okay, I can be heard, and I can hear others also.
Mhm.
You know, I to me that's sort of balled up into this little observation that sometimes people have said, I like who I am when I am in this space. I like who we are when we are in this space. And to me, maybe that's one of those anchors that I kind of hold on to and get excited about. Within the art of hosting community and network, we are practitioners. We do get to contribute and, you know, offer learning and experience with one another. And when it's in the not so art of hosting world, but it's sure a lot of art of hosting and participative stuff. If people come out with that kind of feeling and they feel inspired to do work a little bit differently, or maybe even just like, you know, learned a new muscle of, oh, that's what it's like to suspend a bit of judgment for a little bit in a conversation. I think we're contributing something really good to groups of people that way. Appreciate you both. Thanks for the conversation today.
yeah, I don't think I have anything more to add. As always, rich and unexpected and rewarding to be in these conversations.
Mm.
Yep.
All right. So till next time.
Peace and love.